Mrs. Bennet is a flurry of excitement about a man of large fortune who's about to move into the neighborhood. But what does 4 to 5,000 mean, and why is this such a big deal? Let's find out in today's episode. Welcome to my new series, The History of Pride and Prejudice. In this series, we'll discuss the history, the context, and some details about this era to help first-time readers of Jane Austen appreciate her works even better. Today, in Chapter 1, we're talking about fortunes, the economics of the Regency era, and then ranking all the characters from lowest to largest income. Let's begin with a quote from the book. "Why, my dear, you must know Mrs. Long says that Netherfield is taken by a young man of large fortune from the north of England. A single man of large fortune, 4 or 5,000 a year. During the Regency era, if you had a large fortune or a lump sum of money, maybe it's inherited or earned, you would invest it. And then once a year, that investment would pay out. This was called collecting an annuity. Most fortunes were invested to produce a steady annual income, typically around 4 to 5%. That means Mr. Bingley may have a fortune of around £100,000. That brings him 4 to 5,000 a year. Generally, what mattered was the income and not the lump sum. There were two main forms of income for the gentry class. That is the class that Mr. Bingley, the Bennets, and Mr. Darcy are a part of. Wealth from land or estates. This generated income through rents paid by tenant farmers, families, and other businesses. Or we have the funds, money invested in British government bonds. These paid a fixed interest rate of 4 or 5% and were very common for people without estates. There was also another way to invest your money. This was the consols. It paid out less, 3%, and it was popular with those less affluent and those with smaller fortunes. So where does Mr. Bingley's wealth come from? We read in the novel, Mr. Bingley inherited property to the amount of nearly £100,000 from his father, who had intended to purchase an estate, but did not live to do it. Mr. Bingley's money comes from inherited wealth that his father made in the trades. It's interesting to note that Mrs. Bennet calculates his fortune at 4 to 5%, as she knows a man of his status and wealth could get the better investment. Whereas Mr. Bennet's money comes from his estate. Mr. Bennet's property consisted almost entirely in an estate of 2,000 a year. At this time, wealth from estates was far more prestigious and was definitely a requirement to become part of the landed gentry. Mr. Bingley purchasing Netherfield would be the next natural step for his family to increase their prestige and respectability. That is part of why Caroline Bingley is so anxious for her brother to purchase some property. But at this point in the novel, he is only renting Netherfield. He has not bought it. A dowry was money that a woman brought into a marriage. This contributed to the household's wealth. It was a way to generate additional income through investments. In Chapter 4, we read of the Mrs. Bingleys having large dowries. A fortune of £20,000 had been left them by their father. This refers to each of the Bingley sisters, including Caroline Bingley and Mrs. Hurst. So Miss Bingley has £20,000, which, if invested, would generate roughly £800 to £1,000 a year. Whereas the Mrs. Bennets have a very small fortune of only £1,000 each. We see this mentioning during one of the Miss Bennet's marriage settlements later in the book. All that is required of you is to assure to your daughter, by settlement, her equal share of £5,000 secured among your children after the decease of yourself and my sister, and moreover, to enter into an engagement of allowing her, during your life, £100 per annum. So we see in this marriage agreement, it stipulates the daughter's share being £1,000 being promised to her after her parents' death, with an additional £100 per year during their life. Now let's rank all the characters in Pride and Prejudice, their wealth, where it comes from lowest to highest, using a 4 to 5% investment. The Miss Bennets each have a fortune of £1,000 each. Miss King has a fortune of £10,000. Mr. Collins earns money from a living, which we will discuss in more detail in a later episode, but we can guess that this would bring him somewhere from £500 to £800 per annum. Caroline Bingley has a fortune of £20,000, Georgiana Darcy has a fortune of £30,000, which could generate £1,200 to £1,500 a year. Mr. Bennet earns money from an estate of £2,000 a year. Mr. Bingley has a fortune of around £100,000 that earns him an annuity of £4,000 to £5,000 a year. Finally, Mr. Darcy has a very large estate and probably investments as well that bring him in £10,000 a year. So Mr. Bingley's fortune of $4,000 to $5,000 a year is great news for Mrs. Bennet because she knows her daughters are beautiful and have the potential to marry someone who has doubled their whole household annual income. I think this information also highlights that Mr. Bennet, although not as wealthy as Mr. Bingley, has a healthy annual income of £2,000. How the Bennets spend and use that money, we'll discuss in a later episode as well. If you would like to hear an audio reading of Pride and Prejudice Chapter 1, click the next video in this playlist. Or grab a copy of Pride and Prejudice and read Chapter 1 right now. Otherwise, I hope you'll stay tuned for next week's episode where we'll be discussing Chapter 2 and making acquaintances. Thank you for watching. I just want to mention that this is a hobby channel. I'm not an expert or historian, but I do like reading and doing research, and I just wanted to share what I learned with you because knowing these things helped me to appreciate Jane Austen's novels even more. So if you like period dramas, slow burn romances, and emotionally devastating letters, consider subscribing to my channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!